Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Eden. As far as Eden starts go, this was actually a pretty good one. Our damage is high, our tiers are high, our starting items are actually pretty good. A lot of people don't really like Lemon Mishap, but I think it's actually a really good item, at least early on. As a starting item on Eden, you definitely could go worse, and I say that just because it's so useful against many of the bosses. So it's very useful against Pin, because he jumps at you directly, and especially in a small room like this, if you drop the Lemon Mishap on the ground, there's just a 100% chance that Pin will die as soon as he leaves the ground. It's also very useful against Monstro, because when he jumps, you can actually leave the puddle on the ground, because you know that Monstro is going to jump to your previous position, meaning if you move away, and of course there's a lemonade on the ground, he's gonna jump there, and then he's gonna take a lot of damage. It can also be useful against bosses like Ragman, which have just a bunch of HP, but more importantly, it's useful against the mini spiders he summons, and if you have 4 or maybe 5 spiders in the room for some reason, he just went ballistic and just started spawning spiders everywhere, you can drop the lemonade on the ground, and eventually one of them is going to jump in, and if you manage to hit Ragman as well, that's quite a sizable chunk of damage. So I think Lemon Mishap is actually quite underappreciated. I would say that it's hard to use just because the puddle isn't very big, which means you have to be very precise, and a lot of enemies are, I guess random is the best way to put it. They move randomly, they don't really move predictably, which means that there's not a high chance that you will actually be able to hit those enemies if they move randomly. But against enemies which have tracking on you, it's actually a pretty good item, and the fact you can use it quite well is quite nice if you can actually pull it off, because like I said, it does do quite a sizable amount of damage. Now Holy Water, I can't argue that Holy Water is good, but Lemon Mishap I think can be quite a useful item in a lot of situations. We did also start out with only 1 red health, which is pretty standard for how Eden runs go. As in standard, it's random, so there's really no standard, but I guess the fact that it's random is standard, which makes kind of weird. But regardless, I really like that they didn't go the path of trying to balance the stats of Eden. So let's say that if you have a high damage, they would just intentionally give you less HP. Instead of working like that, which would maybe be sensible if you want a balanced character, everything about Eden is random, which means you can have a very weak run, a very not strong run with very low tiers, but you will still only have 1 red health, but you can also have just a bunch of damage and still have 3 red health, which is, I think, the fun part of Eden, because you have more extremities on either side. You can either be really strong at the start or really weak, and all of those runs are fun in their own way. Obviously when you have a strong run, it's quite an occasion because it doesn't happen often, but also when you have a weak run, you're kind of forced to go to the game in a different manner than you would usually do, and that I think makes Eden quite a compelling character to play as, especially once you get used to the game and you just want some inherent challenges. And having a way to do that in a way that's so elegant, and maybe that kind of works with the game, that you get to starting random items and random stats, is a really nice change of pace whenever you're playing basically this game for like 500 or 600 hours. It's a nice option that Eden is there, because I think Eden does make this game spice up a little bit. Even when he comes up in dailies, it's usually an event, because when you see Maggie, you're like, oh, this will be a slogfest, or you see Azazel, you're like, okay, this one's going to be an easy one, but when you see Eden, you really don't know what to expect. So, talking about bad items, we picked up Mega Bean here, and I picked it up instead of Lemon Mishap, and you might be wondering, but you just argued that Lemon Mishap is good. Well, I argued that Lemon Mishap is good on earlier floors. As you go later on, there are a lot more flying enemies, a lot of more teleporting enemies, and I think Lemon Mishap loses its usefulness. I would still keep it if I wasn't low on bombs, so I decided to pick Mega Bean up because it basically gives you a free bomb effect. You might be saying, well, how exactly does it do that? If you're not watching the screen for whatever reason and you didn't see me using it on the skulls, when you use it, you actually, instead of just farting around you also shoot a bunch of rocks in a target direction. It moves kind of randomly, but if you place yourself just next to the wall, or maybe just next to the rock you want to destroy, and use it there, then it's guaranteed that those rocks that come out of the Mega Bean will actually hit whatever you're trying to hit. And because that counts as an explosion, you can actually destroy rocks with it, you can also open secret rooms with it. So in a way, it's kind of a 3-room charge, so it's almost like a Bob's Brain. And obviously Bob's Brain is not a good item, and Mega Bean isn't a good item as well, but it does have its uses in the sense that you can use it as a temporary bomb every now and then. And because at the time I just didn't have any bombs, and Lemon Mishap, like I said, was starting to lose its usefulness, I decided to swap out for Mega Bean, because in that situation Mega Bean worked out pretty well for us. Okay, but of course I replaced the Mega Bean with the Ivy Bag, because Ivy Bag is one of the best items you can hope for, at least on daily runs, and we had quite a nice combo going on here. So we had the Maw of the Void, which generated quite a lot of black hearts for us. We also had Poison Touch, which means if an enemy dies while he's poisoned or they're poisoned, they also generate a black heart or have a high chance of doing so. We had the Ivy Bag, which obviously is nice because we can damage ourselves, we get a lot of coins, we have a Yarrow Rune, and more importantly, we have a Fanny Pack, which means that every time we take damage, there's also a nice chance that we're going to get a consumable out of it. So a key, a bomb, a golden bob, I got maybe some cards or something like that. So what I'm doing basically here, just because I have a lot of black cards that are generating a lot of spirit cards, and basically every time I use my Fanny Pack I also get additional keys, I just keep doing that. And because there's also a good chance that an enemy will drop your red health every time you damage yourself, you trigger your Polaroid invisibility, you can just run into enemies, poison them, then there's another good chance of actually getting more black hearts and more consumables. So you just keep doing that, you just keep using Ivy Bag, you're invincible basically, you use the poison, use Maw of the Void, and you just end up with a ton of stuff on the ground. And then you use the Yarrow Rune at the end of the boss rush, and you just get a bunch of points. And you can see that we, I think, got like 1,000 points out of that, and that was quite a small play as far as breaking goes. We could have done better, but sadly we did only get the Ivy Back on this floor, and I would have used it better or more efficiently, but just because you have to rush to get to boss rush, and it's kind of unfortunate. Sadly we didn't get any teleport cards to get out of boss rush and then explore the rest of the floor. And we didn't find any AWAS runes, even though I tried to explode quite a few of the Skull Rocks. Even so, we did finish 8th, but remember, I played this only 1 hour after the daily, which means that this is not a representative score. It never is, but I usually play this much later in the day, but because I have some obligations later on, I decided that I would rather record it as fast as I could. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.